Yeah.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Planet Kambo Frogcast. I'm John, I'm here with the Planet Kambo team, and we're going to have a little chat today about a few topics. We're going to talk about the ethical harvesting of Kambo and other medicines, and have a little chat about plant medicines in general. And I'm just going to start by saying that in no way are we endorsing or recommending that people do any kind of medicines that without research. You know, it's your responsibility to research these things and come to your own decision. So this is a chat, just a chat. We're going to cover some topics, and you need to take responsibility and do your own research. So yes, so welcome. And I think a good starting topic will be Kambo, and we can talk about a little bit about how Kambo is harvested and the ethics around that. So for those of you that don't know, I will explain how Kambo is harvested. So it's harvested by members of various tribes, and they go out into the jungle where the frogs are. And then what they do is they capture the frogs, and then they harvest the medicine from them by, they tie them up, but they're not, when they do this, they're very careful not to harm the frogs. And then they scrape the Kambo secretion from the frog skin, they put it onto a stick, and then they let the frogs go. So the frogs are not harmed in any way. And that is how Kambo is harvested. So does anybody have any comment or anything they'd like to say to kick us off?
Yeah, regarding the harvesting, I've read a few details on further on that in the Matsis tribe actually, because it is basically a defense reaction in a way from the frog. It's a secretion that is used for multiple uses, not only for as a sort of a defense from the environment, but also as a how you say, like a sun protector actually for the frog itself, for the skin. But to actually cause the secretion, you actually have to slightly stress the frog. So it could be tiring for the frog, but the frog gets out of it unharmed at the end of the process. So yeah, but they recover quite quickly and effectively. They keep in the surrounding of the tribe, and nevertheless, even although this actual harvesting happens, so it means that there's a symbiosis between the tribe and the frog itself. It is treated in a separate way.
Yeah, and I'll say that the tribesmen and women are the guardians of the forest, so they protect the forest, and there's a give and take relationship in that they give that protection to the forest, and the forest gives back through food and medicine, and they wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that relationship. So the harvesting of Kambo is done ethically, and it's a sacred thing for them to do that. And at the moment, I've not been to the jungle to actually see it or to do it myself. So I'm only going on what I've seen and what I've been told. But it's my understanding that it is a sacred process, and the frogs are looked after and treated with a lot of reverence.
I think, I mean, one of the concerns, and I've seen it in the comments when people are commenting on Facebook, is the way the frogs are tied up and treated. And I think one of the worries is that if this becomes more commercialized, that it won't just be like the Matsis tribes who are harvesting the frogs. It will just be kind of like people who are kind of getting into the market to make some money. So I guess that is the worry with it, because working with Planet Kambo and with Kambo in general, we all, you know, like the process, and we're in favor of the effects that Kambo has on healing people. But if it does become more popularized, there is that worry that you know, the frogs are going to be over harvested in general.
I mean, that is already happening. I mean, it's with anything like this or any industry, there's always going to be that aspect to it where people see it as a way to make money and then they do it in a haphazard way. So I know that that is already happening. There are cowboys out there that, you know, harvest Kambo not in the correct way just to make money. And it's important that you source your Kambo from the right people, and that's what we do at Planet Kambo. But that kind of thing is always going to happen. It doesn't have to be Kambo; it could be anything, any sector. There's always going to be people that are trying to cut corners and try to make a bit of money. But I think that there's definitely a way to do this properly, and the future of Kambo is sustainable harvesting of the frogs. And Planet Kambo definitely will be involved in that, in creating some kind of system where the frogs are looked after. There's not over harvesting, and that's something that it's not happening right now, but it's definitely on the agenda for the future.
I was going to say, it was something that I remember having a conversation with you, John, about. I'm on a plant-based diet, so I consider myself vegan. So that was one of the sort of big sort of ethical choices, things that I was thinking about when I was looking for training, because I had done Kambo in the past, and how much that it gave me and it helped me. It was something that I wanted to pursue and go into, but it was making the decision, and it was that thing about there's the mutual respect that you're giving back. But the more that we're talking about that it's getting popular, like all of these things, like there was a big burst around ayahuasca a few years ago, and now you hear all these sort of stories in Peru where they have these sort of shaman who aren't shaman kind of things like this, trying to sort of the spiritual tourism. So I think it's really important that you do your research when you're looking at any of these things, because like you're saying, anyone's sort of, as soon as something gets popular, there's a way of to make money out of it. But the biggest thing is that we're doing the research and know where it comes from, because it's so difficult to regulate as it's not legal. So it would be amazing if we could have these places where we say, like, this is where you get your Kambo, this is exactly where it is, but I don't know if that will ever be a thing.
Well, I'd like to think that in time, Planet Kambo we'll buy areas of rainforest, and we'll have some kind of Kambo reserve where we know the frogs are looked after. We hire the right people to do it, and then they're obviously compensated for their work. So the tribes get paid for their work, which helps them, and the frogs are looked after. And it's and then obviously we get the benefit of receiving the Kambo as well. And then also because Kambo varies in strength depending on when it's harvested, whether it's like the frog produces this secretion, and the first sort of lot of secretion that's on its skin will be a lot stronger than subsequent secretions based on some period of time. So there's definitely scope for I don't know what the right word is, regulating or some kind of quality control on the quality of the secretion that you're getting, because when you get really good Kambo, it's so strong, you don't need that much. Couple of dots of fresh Kambo that's very, very strong is so powerful. I think in all the time that I've done Kambo, there was one stick that we had one time that was completely different to any other stick that we've ever had. And when you scrape Kambo, the fresher it is, the more jelly-like, the more gelatinous and gloopy it is, and it's it's almost difficult to manipulate with the knife on the stick because it's so sticky. It's hard to cut into points. And there was one time when we had that stick and I did 8 points on my back, and it was so instantaneous. Kambo's pretty instantaneous anyway, but this was literally immediately. As soon as it went on, it came on immediately. My face went bright red, and I purged the bile within a couple of minutes. And then I said, "Take it off. Just take it off. It's too much." Because 8 points was of that strength was too much. Definitely, I probably could have got away with 3 points.
It's always good to try before a little, like go slowly for a new batch, I guess. Yeah.
But you can tell. No, but you can tell by looking at it. It's like most Kambo looks. When you play with it on the stick, it's got a certain feel to it, a certain texture, a certain stickiness. And when it's really sticky, you can tell when it's going to be stronger. But at that time, this was quite a while ago, I knew it was different, but I just was like, just do 8 points anyway. It's obviously not dangerous, but it was just so strong, so incredibly strong that, yeah, it was so quick as well. It just, within not even 5 minutes, I was done.
What, the entire purge?
Yep.
Really?
Like the bile came after a couple of minutes,
Mm.
and I had to tell them to take it off because it was too much, and I was done within 10 minutes.
Wow.
Sounds like my perfect purge.
Yeah. So that's the Kambo process, the harvesting, and the ethics around it. And I do think that if it's done right, that it can be done. It can be done in the right way. And I feel like there's a reason that this secretion has this effect on human beings. In the divine plan, Kambo is there to heal people. Yes, it's there. Obviously it belongs to the frog, but I feel like there's a reason that it has this effect on human beings, and it just needs to be managed in a way that everybody benefits from it, including the frog. That the ecosystem of the whole thing isn't damaged in any way. And as with all things in nature and in the world, that there are certain things, certain plants and various substances that have a certain effect. And I do feel like there's some kind of reason why they do, and that we as a species and as a race, we just need to use these things and harvest these things in a way where we do it with respect, and we don't just destroy the source. And it'd be the same with food. Like look at the way we do intensive farming. We over farm animals. We destroy the soil because we with too much agriculture without giving back to the soil. So I think it goes across the board that we need to find sustainable ways to live with everything that we do and consume and everything, all of these things. But we just need to do it from a place of the greater good rather than selfishness.
It links nicely to a book that I read a little while ago from called Ishmael, and it talks about the two different type of approach towards nature man. One, it was from the taker's point of view, which is the paradigm where we are now, where everything is actually for our exploitation, complete exploitation, no limits, no control even on what consequences you have. So pretty much a view without sustainability and no harmony between nature and man. And instead what we had before, when we were more like in a hunter-gatherer type of scenario, and it was the leavers. So basically, like tribes like the Matses, they understand very well that they cannot overcharge the taking. There's a good balance that needs to be kept between their surrounding and what they can take of it, and they cannot take any more than they need. Otherwise, there's not going to be. They understand very well. There's not going to be any more when they will need it in the future. So that approach surely applies when the harvesting of Kambo is made, at least in a traditional way. and it should on many other things. Going back to that point of view and that kind of behavior, I think it is the healthy way. And there are many studies that are actually pointing in that direction in general in sustainability from many points of view, economical, but even agricultural sustainability. Like one comes to mind, it's the permacultures or systems where really you don't interfere too much with nature. You let the plants interact between each other, and you don't need to put any kind of fertilizers. The actual ecosystem, works itself out without your intervention, which is always deficient. As humans, we can see just a little fraction of what goes on actually around the plant, and trying to control it too much, probably it gets you to very limited effects. Yeah.
And what's just come to mind actually is a quote by Terence McKenna, and this is like, in that some might say, well, what right do we have as human beings to do these things and to take from nature in the way that we do? And Terence McKenna said that we have 3 primal drives that drive our behavior. 1 is hunting, 2 is fucking, and 3 is tripping. Those 3 things, and it's sort of like every human being, you have these primal drives, and it's sort of like you have a birthright of these 3 things. It's to hunt, to fuck, and to trip. As a human being, that's I don't know. It just popped into my head. I thought it was quite interesting.
Relevant.
And it's also with regards to like tripping. Graham Hancock talks about this a lot. He talks about the war on drugs and the war on consciousness. And actually, that's what the war on drugs is. It's a war on our consciousness. And he's like, who has the right to tell me what I can or can't put in my body? Who has the right to do that? If something grows in nature, and I am of nature, I am of this earth, who has the right to tell me that I can't ingest this plant or whatever it is for my own benefit? Because I have sovereign over my own body. And if an organization or a government or anybody tells me, not just tells me, orders that I can't do that, and that is an infringement on my basic human rights.
Absolutely. And that actually works even the other way, when you're actually compelled to take something. An example that comes to my mind is vaccines. I mean, whether one is pro or against it, being forced to do it, it just infringes the same right completely. So yeah, I agree completely.
Graham Hancock does make a really compelling argument, and he makes a lot of the laws on drugs seem quite ridiculous, because when he puts it in those terms, it seems very contradictory that we're sovereign in a lot of different areas when it comes to the law, but in terms of making a choice as to what you want to ingest or consume into your own body, that decision is made out of our hands, essentially. So yeah, I mean, I think he will be able to change the culture to a point where eventually, I think a lot of these drugs will be decriminalized, like countries like Portugal, and it seems to be a lot more beneficial, because since Portugal decriminalized a lot of their drugs, crimes have gone down. The rehabilitation rates are a lot better. They treat it as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. So a lot of heroin addicts, for instance, are helped to get back into the workforce and get jobs, and incentivized to do that rather than being given a criminal record. So yeah, I mean, these are definitely areas which I think a lot of countries could learn from.
And also, it's human nature. When something's forbidden, it makes you want to do it more. If you give something to somebody on a plate, they don't want it, right? You tell them they can't have it, then they'll really want it. the scarcity kind of mindset thing. So the psychology of it is all wrong, because, you know, especially teenagers want to do taboo stuff. They want to do forbidden things. So drugs in general for teenagers is like catnip, you know. And I remember when I got to around that age, you know, and everything's new and exciting, and you start partying and doing all these things, and suddenly there's this whole world opens up, and then you have these things that's like, oh, it's not really allowed, it's not allowed, and that makes me really want to do it. And there's that rebellion aspect to it as well. So I think the whole thing needs to be completely rethought, and this is what Graham Hancock says, like that whole area needs to be completely rethought, because the strategy doesn't work.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
And from another point of view as well, something that Russell Brand said when he was a heroin addict, you know, whether it was legal or illegal, it didn't really make a difference, because if you're addicted to a substance like that, you're just going to do it anyway. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the whole situation around drugs does need a major rethink.
Can I say something on like the decrim aspect? That it worked really successfully in Portugal, because Portugal had a very heavy heroin epidemic in the 80s and 90s, and it worked to decriminalize everything, because it meant that funds suddenly it became, we're not going to put funds into the criminalization of these people. Actually, we're going to take all those funds and we're going to siphon them back into getting people back into employment, offering them services to support, to get out of addiction, etc., etc., etc. And there's a decriminalization model that's popping up in the States at the moment, because there are individual states in the US that are talking about, or that have decriminalized psilocybin or cannabis. So there's this burgeoning movement that's saying, okay, oh look, we are stepping towards the decriminalization of, and I'm using like drugs, and I don't think of things like ayahuasca or Kambo, or I mean, Kambo not being a psychoactive, but you know, San Pedro, I don't think of those things as drugs per se. But anyway, this is all being kind of lumped in together, the decriminalization of drugs. And I'm wondering how it is that we look at, so the Native American churches, I can't remember what their kind of overarching organization is called, but they've released policy statements saying that they do not want peyote, which is their religious sacrament, included in any decriminalization legislation, because at the moment peyote is harvested all the time by people that are non-indigenous, and so it's the crop itself, they're finding it's becoming endangered because it's not being harvested in the way in which Native Americans do harvest it, which is cyclical. People don't know how to harvest it anyway, so they're destroying peyote by actually harvesting it inappropriately. And so they're saying, if this is going to happen, if you're looking at decriminalization, then we don't want we don't want peyote in it, because it will give a kind of an open door policy to people thinking, oh, we can just go and take that then. And I'm wondering how we think about, because I don't have any answers to this question. I've never done peyote, and I would love to, or I'm curious, but at the same time, I'm also, I ask myself, okay, well, where now, if I read that statement, where do my ethics lie? Do I say, okay, this is a sacrament for a group of people and has been for thousands of years. I'm not an indigenous person. Is it imperative to my life? You know,
I feel like if they decriminalize it, there still needs to be some kind of boundary, you know, because I guess that's why they are holding on to it as a sacrament, because things like peyote and ayahuasca, they're seen as something that they're sacred. They're sacred medicines. So I guess with the decriminalization, I guess there'd be some kind of boundaries, you know, where it can be used. Like, for example, they're doing psilocybin tests within hospitals and trials like that. So being able to use in that kind of environment, you know.
So there's currently legislation in the States on a federal, it exists federally, which means across the whole of the United States, and it exists in Texas as well, because I believe that's where you can harvest peyote as well. It's in one area of Texas, but that says that the possession and transportation of peyote, so this is legislation that's in place already, is only for Native Americans. So I think that was in the mid-90s that legislation was put in place. That hasn't changed for non-Indigenous people wanting to try peyote and going to places to try and find it and harvest it for themselves. So I'm wondering, because I don't know what the answer to that is, because I mean, I think to myself, I think about are there medicines that we can harvest, access, which are maintain a reverence for other culture, but that we can still access as well. So I think about the extraction of DMT. Can we do that in a way where we can experience that without it having any impact on another community?
If I can add on this,
I feel that.
Yeah, go on, Nat.
I was going to say, I understand it is new to the Western world, but really, when you talk back into our ancestors, I feel like sacred medicines of things like this is our ancestral right, and it's to be adapted in a Western way, but still maintaining kind of sacredness towards the medicine and doing it in an ethical way and doing it for the right reasons. I understand why they don't want people to abuse their culture, which I can see, but in my view is that medicines, for people who want to use it from a loving place, it's our ancestral right, especially within ceremonial setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the boundary. I mean, as much as it can be part of a personal journey of each one, but these are medicines that come with a history, a massive one, which first of all, in my opinion, needs to be conserved and sheltered in a way from the modern culture, which is much more single serve everything, and this would allow also to avoid having the chase of the high, which is really not what probably these medicines were actually in. Therefore, they're all for the improvement and raising of the consciousness of each one, for each one to heal and be able to get beyond their sticking points, their traumas, or anything in their life that is actually not serving them anymore. The benefits are clear and whether anecdotal or always less so, because there's been more and more research, especially in America, on many of these medicines. It is clear that there are, and I can actually vouch for that as well. Whatever personal experience I had in my life, it actually has bring me all the improvements. But I always actually found incredibly important the setting. So how do you actually do it? So it's I understand completely the point of James on this, that it is a bit of a dilemma, and one way to get out of it probably is to create it like a sacred context for this to be used in a completely legal way for whoever wants to access it. I don't know if a certification or some sort of regulation would help, but and again, that you get into a number of other troubles on defining how do you get the certification, who do you involve for that, and that it's a whole other set of issues that you trigger if you go that way. And one would wish that people would be again, not takers, and not just do it for the high or for the, because you heard it's incredible, and but not really understanding the deeper meaning that it's right beyond the aesthetics of many of these medicines. So it's it's definitely something that needs to be discussed, and we as a community can contribute with ideas and potential solutions, and I think we all have as a healing community, a light work, or whatever you want to call it, we have big responsibility in coming up with ways that this is actually that these contexts, sacred contexts, are preserved. I think, yeah.
I think the beauty now is that, well, in the Western world, is being able to take the spiritual side and mix it with science. So all the scientific research that they got doing psychotherapy and psilocybin studies in Imperial, that's amazing, of blending the two together, where you have a safe environment and as well that you're guided through it, and it kind of meets in with that kind of Western world, because not everybody is open to the kind of traditional ways of using medicine. But you're definitely right, it's medicines is not to be used like, you know, the misconception as a party drug, because when you open yourself up to such things in your brains, it can take you anywhere, to the dark and light, and this is where we can get trapped in certain energies if we're not in the right setting and guided through this, you know.
Yeah,
so definitely not recommended to be done by yourself, and to take in, you know, it's, you know, you can't go to like a dealer and be like, oh yeah, can I have this, and take it by yourself and do it recreationally, because you don't know where it's going to take you, and it could cause more harm than good.
It comes to my mind one very important thing is education, actually, keeping everybody well aware since early times, since teenage is a perfect start to understand that these are not and they're not for entertainment, and needs to explain precisely why. So this is something completely there's no information at all to teenagers right now. There's no idea. So many people like actually don't really know what they are getting into in a rave or something, when they're actually taking some of the you know, the chemicals that are available, and it is a problem, because then you may cause more harm than none. You may create like issues that wouldn't otherwise have panned out if people were aware that there are certain contexts to do it properly, that can actually really help you a lot. Yeah,
I think it's one of those things that has to come through personal experience, and no matter how much you tell a person not to do something, there'll always be an inner drive to do it, because there's always a sense of individuality and living life by your own terms and discovering things through your own terms. So if somebody tells you, oh, don't do this, don't do that, they'll always be compelled inside to try that out for the sake of the danger, and to see what is in this, because you view everything from your own perspective. So you will never understand what it's like to view it from another perspective until you experienced it for yourself in your unique way. So I guess in this new era that we have, everything, the communications are getting much faster, technology is moving much quicker, and everything at the time is moving much quicker. So we can obtain anything and everywhere much faster, many times fold faster than we could 20, 30 years ago. And it's just going to increase. Everything's going to get more commercialized. Everyone's going to chase more of these things, more of these experiences, to the point where it might lose a little bit of its grace, and it already has. But you come to the point where you've done it, and some things like ayahuasca, you realize you don't get addicted to it because you know what it has for you. You know, it always has a limit. You take it and you realize, I don't want to go back to that space. For most people who take it for the wrong reason, they'll meet that resistance, the wall, right afterwards. They won't take it 5, 6, 7 times and then realize it's bad with certain other chemicals, or they'll take it once or twice and to be done. Okay, no, that's it, I'm done. So I think even with these plant medicines, the more you criminalize it, the more people will want to chase it.
Exactly.
So if it's outlawed, you know, like weed, for example, like marijuana, everybody will want to chase it. Everybody is chasing it. So, you know, if Canada is decriminalizing it, well, actually, that way you can actually reduce the numbers that are using these substances, because then there's less of a compulsion to try something which is forbidden in a way.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, every time you criminalize something, or it goes on the underground, and then you have less insight, understanding of how it is actually supplied, if it's safe. There's no talking about like the really the quality of what you're actually getting, and if it may put you in harm. There's been a lot of cases here in the UK of people who got poisoned by marijuana, for example, because of it contains weighting agent, something that made it actually weight more. I think it was glass shards and or
like sand
ammonia that makes you like feel a bit more dizzy, but it is actually poison. So how if it needs to be the actual, that actually points to potentially a solution in legalizing completely all of these, and rather investing all of the money and effort in educating people and make sure that everybody's aware that this is it. In the end, if you want to do it, whether it's legal or not, you're going to find a way. So rather, it's possible, rather than ending in prison for it, especially for things as you know, as rightly pointed out before, that it is actually completely your body, your decision of what you want to do with it. It's you may actually learn something and ahead of time make a you know, a decision whether this is actually something for you that you may need, because this is the thing. It is true. Everything is getting faster, quicker, and easier to access, but there may be a reason for it that we just don't clearly see now. There may be a need for it. A lot of more people are probably struggling more and more with mental health issues, with a lot of trouble that our society is pressuring actually more and more. So that access may be actually, in a way, a good thing. However, if you don't know what you're doing, probably you're putting yourself into potentially harm's way, or at least not such a rewarding experience as it could be. Let's put it that way. But
it makes perfect sense. And this thought just came across my mind that we spend a lot of our lifetime going to school learning something, but when it comes to the real life knowledge, when it comes to these things like plant medicines, taking responsible choices, washing your hands for coronavirus, we have to be told by somebody how to be responsible, how to do things to prevent something that are trivial. We seem completely useless, even though we've had this years of long education in schools. I know for many people, of course, being very responsible and doing this wonderfully, but it's like there's this necessity still to warn people and make them behave in a certain way, and we just seem vulnerable to it in some way. We just seem like, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do whatever you tell me. But there's always a resistance, of course. You always get both sides to that.
I was gonna say, it's interesting as well, the last couple of years, how popular microdosing has been, and then how it's been more popular in the less sort of spiritual people. So I'm having conversations with people who go about microdosing, all sorts of different drugs, but they're actually doing more research and learning about them, and people that I would never think I would be having those kind of conversations with. But it's sort of softening it. So there's the one side that people are doing more research, but by softening it as well, it's sort of opening it up to people trying things. And I don't know, when you talk to people about doses and things like that, it's really interesting because people are sort of playing out and sort of seeing what's right for them. But it's interesting that there's more and more articles, there's more and more things talking about these different medicines recently. So it's just, it feels like there's sort of a softening around it, even though, you know, if you have like a full dose of these things, it can be completely life-changing. So it's interesting how it's all sort of changing now.
But do you think, Helen, that's like that the like microdosing is quite heavily connected with like Silicon Valley, and that, you know, kind of creative hotbed, which in and of itself, it feeds back into So lots of people take psychedelics or psychoactive plants to have it, to have an expansive experience. Lots of people go on spiritual journeys with these things. And then there's microdosing happening in an industry which is actually just, which feeds into the kind of capitalist consciousness. So they microdose to be more focused, more sharp, more creatively aligned. And it's almost like it continues to feed that particular monster.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about the kind of capitalist culture, which is like, we'll just take whatever, we just keep taking and taking and taking. Because I'm interested in maybe I'd ask you, all of you, when I think about things like peyote and I think about things like bufo, where there's a risk to those things becoming endangered to the point where they may be like wiped out and then they don't exist anymore. And I'm curious as whether actually there's space or interest, or whether, because we can synthetically produce those substances. And I remember reading about, I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think the woman that introduced psilocybin to the Western world, I think her name was Maria Sabina in Oaxaca in Mexico, I think her name. So she was practiced curandera.
Yeah.
And she was given synthetically produced psilocybin. So she tripped on synthetically produced psilocybin. And when she came back from it, she said, yes, the spirit of the mushroom is still present in this thing. And I wonder if there's a space there which enables us to still be able to step into these expansive states and explore consciousness in whichever way we wish to, but where it has less impact on the natural environment from which it comes, or on cultures from which it is inherently kind of interlocked with.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, James, because I was recently speaking to a practitioner of Bufo, and they use a synthetic one, and I said, oh, but it's not coming from the plant, like how, from the amphibian, the toad, like how is it? And they were saying that it's still ethically made, so it's made with that love in it, and it's ethical because you're not using the toad as well, and they were saying that it's actually cleaner because it's measured, and you always have the same kind of trip with it because of how it's been produced, where the toad is sometimes here and there, it's not as clean as the synthetic one.
Actually, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, getting back to that point, a big theme that's coming up is how do you decriminalize these substances and still, protect them from over demand and people just going crazy on them. And but there are a lot of other examples of industries where that's happened, like fishing, for example. There's restrictions and regulations around that, the ivory trade, that kind of thing. So you could decriminalize it and treat it as a health issue and still have the right kind of structure in place to harvest and produce these substances ethically, so they aren't just wiped out of existence.
So then, contrary, sorry, I was going to say on the contrary to that, because I know with cannabis, with this, they're seeing it as like the biggest money-making, growing business in the corporate kind of world, and I know I've heard that there's a lot of people that are only going into it because of the money. So what was you going to say, Jamesy?
Well, no, I was just going to say that then after sustainability, and if sustainability links with protecting the environment and also protecting ties that medicines have with communities, then after that, the kind of level of Western commodification, how we examine Western commodifications reciprocal support for where the origins of what it is that we're doing. So, John was talking earlier about Planet Kambo. One of the aims is to set up to have space which is run by local people as a protection, reservation. Correct me if I'm speaking wrong, John. And that kind of, how do we, what's our responsibility as non-Indigenous people to kind of feed back into the loop so that it's not just taken out?
Saying that we're non-Indigenous people, it's just that we've forgotten our ways. Because, for example, the mushroom is indigenous to England.
Yeah.
But sorry, but how we can feed back, I guess it'd be education, or yeah.
I mean, Ali, and I think you mentioned it as well, Natalie. You made very good points where with a lot of these things, they do have to be done in the right kind of framework. And I think we probably watched the same interview with Dr. Rosalind Watts from Imperial, where she was saying you have to have the framework to introduce these substances and make sure that they're dealt with in the right way. Because, I mean, on one hand, Graham Hancock makes a really great argument that it's up to each individual to be able to choose what they want to consume and what they don't. And that's their right. But at the same time, we can't avoid the fact that, there is the potential for danger with some of these substances if they're abused and not used in the right way.
I want to add
why it's
one
so
thing.
important to do it in the.
I just wanted to add one thought on how this actually relates as well to the current situation where we're now, where there's these means actually to access all of this type of medicine because of travel constriction and so forth is reduced a lot. And I wanted to add one thought from the yogic tradition. At least the point of view is that these are just temporary glimpses of a state that you could potentially reach with practice and with inner work, shadow work, which is basically dealing with your trauma and everything that you have pretty much your karmic experience, if you want, all of the baggage that you're carrying. And eventually you could reach those states as a whenever you want, without the need of any kind of helper. So really these are just means for a very, very kind of, if you want, spiritually sick type of societies like ours, where we're so detached from our environment, from who we really are, that you need a bit of a kind of a wake up call. That's it. And so I think there's a lot to talk about that, and that would if you want, in a way, reduce the need for such a mass scale of usage of all these products and medicines. It would be more like it would be more like targeted to people who actually really need this type of help for health reason or mental health reasons sometimes. So there are many practices you can do to work on yourself and start already healing yourself without that massive commercialization, if you want, of these medicines. So to fend off a little bit that issue, I think. Yeah.
I agree. It's definitely I agree with you, Ali, because it's about evoking our own medicine within. For example, we have DMT naturally, we've just forgotten how to evoke it within ourselves. But different breath work practices and work that we can do, we can evoke these same effects of the medicines within ourselves.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I've never had experience with LSD or anything like that, but I've heard that it's so after you take it a certain amount of times, it stops having an effect on you. so you can only take it so much, and then it gets to a point where you can't, it doesn't have the same kind of you don't trip on it anymore, essentially.
I took it a lot in the 90s, and
sorry, was that correct?
no. I mean, I took it in the 90s a lot, and it never. I mean,
I've never heard that.
yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, well, I mean, so the point I was going to get at, though, was some people come to these substances and get what they need out of them, and then they don't need to take it anymore. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that you can do a lot of the work on your own afterwards, but sometimes it's a good wake up call, and
to trigger it,
kind of gets you on the right path sometimes.
But the psychedelic medicines, what they are teachers and they are accelerators, and what you can't do is just not do any of the work and just take the psychedelics and expect anything to happen, because then you're just tripping. But if you're doing the work, meditating, self-inquiry, studying spirituality, consciousness, then the psychedelics are very powerful, because they opens a window and you get to see the finish line, so to speak, and they can accelerate progress and insight massively, to a unimaginable degree that you couldn't get there without. And it depends on what substances we're talking about, but there'll be states that you can get to with psychedelics that you can never get to, even with the whole lifetime of meditation. You will never be able to get there. So they're definitely, if used correctly, used responsibly, and they're used as tools, as part of your ongoing work, alongside ongoing work, then they can take you to places that even enlightened Zen masters will never ever get to.
That's why they're called teachers.
Master plants.
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube that I'm sure a lot of you may have seen, a guy called Leo. He's got a YouTube channel, actualize.org, and he does a lot of work. He's put the work in, and he also uses powerful psychedelics. And he talks very candidly about this topic, and said that he's had states of consciousness that he's reached that very few human beings, if any, have ever got to. And, he's worked with enlightened Zen masters who have never used these substances, and they'll never ever get to those places that you can get to with them. And again, it's like the caveat to that is you can't just say, I'm going to take a psychedelic and become enlightened and whatever. It's not how it works. You have to do all the work, really do the work, and then these medicines become very, very powerful, because they will give you perspective, and they will allow understanding, non-dual understanding that goes beyond the mind, in understanding that can't be explained in words, that can only be experienced. That kind of understanding, that kind of knowing. It's not knowing as in conceptual knowledge, it's knowing as in being, as in becoming the knowledge, which cannot be explained, which cannot be taught. That's what they'll give you. And but they're very powerful and can be very dangerous things. So they have to be treated with massive respect, and you have to put the work in. They're not shortcuts. And when you look at them like that and you understand what they are, then it makes sense. It totally makes sense. And I do believe that they're there for a reason. Then it's not just random things that exist. They're like, I don't know how I can put it in it. Almost like, and this is a, you could look at it as a story. I'm not saying this is actually what it is, but the way I like to think about it is it's almost like, and I'm going to use this word, but I know it's a loaded word, so you can take this word and swap it with whatever you like to use, but the word God, you can change that to the universe, to a higher power, to the force, whatever it be, but it's almost like a trail of breadcrumbs that's been left. That's what these medicines are. It's like God has left a trail of breadcrumbs for us to
Connect with.
turn to become, to remember who we are, to remember who we really are. And these are like a trail of breadcrumbs back to that knowledge of who we really are.
Amen to that, John.
Amen. Aho.
Aho.
At the same time, I remember watching a video a couple of years ago when they talked about the history of psychedelics and entheogens, and but it's always been a situation where there's been outbursts of it. So like there's been periods where they flourished. I guess one of the most recent is like the 70s with the hippie movement in the US, and everyone was on LSD except if you were James in the 90s. But yeah, there seems to be periods where they flourish, and then there's a crackdown on them by the government or by the authorities, and are regulated. So it seems like, you know, naturally there's periods where it's good to like get in, because they kind of they're a catalyst for creativity and kind of different perspectives on consciousness and thinking in different ways. But at the same time, they do need to be treated with respect and regulated and dealt with in the right way. Because I don't think anyone on the call is saying that the answer is just, you know, just to do more of these substances. I think it's like knowing whether you need to do them first of all, because not everyone does, right? I mean, sometimes it's enough for just a few people to take these substances and then kind of go to the tribe, if you will, and relay what they've learned from their experiences.
Yeah,
I think going back to the 70s, sorry, because you mentioned the 70s, and I'm always banging on about the 70s. I feel like in the 70s, when everyone did all these kind of psychedelics, the reason why people weren't taking them seriously is because they wasn't doing it with an intention or doing it in a certain setting. So they weren't able to come back and ground their experience, so they're able to speak about it, even on a scientific level, to the masses, you know, just from a grounded, earthly level. So that's why I think people never took the hippies seriously, like, oh, you're just a hippie, oh, you're just floating around, you know. But in this day and age, again, the science and the psychedelics put together is a beautiful way of, the science is bringing the psychedelics down to that earthly realm, so it's more accessible for people to do it in again a scientifically safe environment, so to say.
Also, here's the main difference, right? We're in a unique time in history. At these other periods of time, like you said, when you'll have like a burst of use and then it gets shut down or whatever. The one difference we have now is technology and the internet. There is at the moment we're having a surge or a burst of it. I don't think it's going to go away because we now have the internet. That's the difference. Is it won't before the internet, it was very much you had to be in the know. You had to know someone who knew about these things, or know someone who could get them, or know some. Do you know what I mean? It was a very cliquey kind of thing. We live in this age now where there's the internet. Anybody can go online and research these things. And if you really want to find out and you really want to do it, you can find a way. Like back in the 60s and 70s, like now I can go online. I can find retreat centers in Peru, right, to go and do ayahuasca, or I can find a retreat center and go and do a boga, or I can go to wherever and do mushrooms or whatever it is. You couldn't do that back then. So I think that we're at a point. We're at a point in history where we have the internet. Yes, it does. It's
only because of the discernment. Yeah,
double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. But the internet is. We're in an age of enlightenment and information, and I don't think we're ever going to go backwards. So I think that it's only going to accelerate from here, and eventually we'll reach a point where all of these medicines will be used. Like it's already happening now, where MDMA is going to be legal for therapists to use for people with PTSD by 2021. I wrote an article on that for Planet Kambo. Psilocybin will be available, I'm sure, within a few years. And I think within the next sort of 20, 30, 50 years, most of these medicines will be available to be used therapeutically, simply because they won't be able to stop it. They just won't be able to stop it because of the internet, because of the level, the age of information that we're living in. So, the internet is a wonderful thing. It's also has its dark side, but the internet is almost, I see it as a real huge step towards us coming together as one consciousness. Because if you think about how amazing this is, it's like if I wanted to send something to someone in Australia, right, and I sent a letter, if you think about, look historically, before we had telephones, right? If you wanted to talk to someone in Australia and you sent them a letter, it would take weeks, if not months, before they got your letter, right? Then when we had telephones, you could phone someone. Now I can do a Skype or a Zoom call with someone. I can see their face, or if I want to send them a document, I send them an email and they get it instantly, right? That is astounding. We take it for granted now, but that is like, if you took someone from the, I don't know, from the 1800s or the 1900s, before all this stuff, and you were to transport them now and they saw all this stuff, it's like, they'd see it as witchcraft. Or if you took someone from medieval times, any technology that you don't understand is magic, is witchcraft, essentially. So, we take all this stuff for granted, like your mobile phone. I mean, I've got this thing that I carry around with me. Anybody in the world can phone me or contact me at any time, and it goes through a satellite in space. I mean, that's astonishing, that technology, but we just take it for granted now. So it's a great time to be alive. We're in an enlightened age. We have all these tools and technology, and it's only accelerating. So we need to embrace it. And like, going back to my original point, is that I don't think this current surge in medicine use is going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm. This is one of those times.
Anyone with
Go on.
I was going to say, my advice for those seeking medicine, a lot of people wish to seek it, is to kind of be open and let it come to you. You can do the research, but when you push against it, this is where I don't know, you could go away and have a bad experience in Peru. But just instead of seeking it, just let it come to you and seek you. And if it's meant for you, it will always come to you. We're frozen.
Nick, you were gonna say
It's left me. It's left me. It's left.
Oh, okay.
Not important.
Why not?
It's just left my head, so it must have not.
Oh, it's gone.
It'll come back.
Yeah, but going back to what I was saying, with like the technology we have is incredible. Like we're in the current situation with coronavirus, yet everybody has found a way to stay connected through, most businesses that are similar to us, they're all doing free webinars or doing some kind of online thing. If this virus had happened before we had the internet, then we'd all be completely isolated and we wouldn't even, this is like, I'm talking to you guys, I can see your faces. It's almost like we're in the same room. So we have a lot to be thankful for, in that we could have a call like this whenever we want. It's amazing when you really think about it. It's absolutely astonishing, the technology that we have. So even though it is a double-edged sword, technology is amazing. And I've talked about this on previous videos and podcasts, where it's great, but also it's having a smartphone and having technology is a way not to feel, because then we start to use that as a way to avoid our own feelings. So again, it's like the technology, like internet and phone and computer, it's kind of like a psychedelic, in that you have to use it as a tool and not use it to get high or to avoid your feelings.
Mm.
Or basically letting it use you, basically.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
I think we're standing on a precipice where we simply cannot predict what's going to happen in the next year, and time is moving so quickly, and it's moving exponentially in speed that every month then transitions into the space of 1 week, and you simply cannot predict what happens. We stand on a precipice where we feel like we could jump and either find our wings to fly or fall down to the ground whilst we ruminate in thought and ruminate in emotions or anxiety and not knowing what to do. Internet is probably one of those things where you get so much more responsibility, so much more, such a strong tool that you could get so attached to that it can completely, in a way, I wouldn't say destroy you, but it could completely kind of
Crush you.
in some way, yeah. Or you could completely transform your life. It's like the duality is increasing. The duality of the good and supposedly the bad, the gain, it's just widening. The good side,
the discriminant there is just where you are starting from, where you are coming from, how you use it. And as John was saying, it's a double-edged sword. So really, that's why the prime thing is actually working on yourself, because that's where you completely understand when it's too much, when it's too little. You can see yourself actually abusing of I don't know, Candy Crush or whatever that is, or just Instagram, whatever tool, because they could be instead. I had, for example, a very strong repulsion toward all of these means, but I understood that there's a lot of people who are using it correctly, and it's a fantastic source of amazing information, and I could do the same thing too. So it is a tool. It's like a screwdriver, just the same thing.
Yeah. Well said.
Balance, just like everything in life, the balance.
Cool. I think, have we been going for over an hour now? I think could be maybe a good time to start wrapping up. Ryan?
Yeah, any final thoughts? James,
Thoughts.
you were a big fan of these topics. Have you got any final thoughts for us?
Okay, I'll share. On the first time I sat with ayahuasca, and this, I think this kind of ties back into something John was saying earlier, but I would say that I didn't know it at the time. I had probably the most transformational experience of my life. And by that, I mean that I'd spent, the majority of my adult life in kind of psychotherapeutic modalities, trying to heal a part of my own trauma. And like, I had tried really hard, like I tried everything, like consistently over years, and, and things had changed, but I'd never been able to just get that kind of, that last core thing. And I sat with ayahuasca, and it completely shifted it. Like, it just, like it just disappeared. And so I see this, like, but I suppose what I'm tying into what John said earlier was about, like, I'd done the work. It wasn't that I'd just gone, okay, I'm just turning up at this, and this is going to be the thing that is going to, like, heal me. I had consistently gone and like sat in rooms and explored the depths of myself before I got to that moment. But I suppose I came out of that experience and was like, wow, oh my God, this is incredible. Absolutely everyone should do it. And I think now, a few years down the line, I think about just being more mindful about what it looks like on a, just kind of stepping out of it and just having a bit of distance to, who you're working with, what's their motivation, being, we work the way Planet Kambo works is incredibly heart-centered. People are super generously spirited. And I think that if, I'm looking for that kind of, model of behavior or community if I'm going to go and sit in another circle with other people. And I would suggest that would be the thing, that if you're interested in this, you're looking for that. You're looking for that kind of holding. You know, that's what I got. That's what I've had every time I've sat in ceremony. And so I think it can be transformational, but just like trust your gut with who you're going to do it with.
Yeah. Set and setting, as always.
Yeah.
Great point. And yeah, very interesting story as well. So yeah, okay guys, well, I mean, if there's no other final comments before we wrap up, maybe this is a good time to end the Frogcast. We're all sitting here very peacefully because just before we started the podcast, we were doing some Wim Hof breathing techniques and applying some rapé. So I think we're all ready to go outside and enjoy the Easter weather.
We're not allowed to go outside.
Well, I open a window, I guess.
For a jog.
The daily exercise. Yeah.
Or you can use the internet to just look at a video where somebody goes outside. You can see the sun in the same way.
Cool.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Okay,
Blessing
bye.
as always. Bye.
Bye-bye.